All right, welcome to another episode of Comic Book Squares. We got another great one today. My name's Shane.
I'm Carrie.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Mike. Let's get this show started.
All right, well, welcome to another episode of Comic Book Squares. This is a very unique one for us. We're actually at a comic book shop. This is Ken's comic book shop, Drawn to Comics in Glendale. Comic shop that I go to. It's I will say, the best comic shop in the world. I don't know if that's official, but I think it is. So today we're going to be interviewing Armando, wonderful artist. And Ken is a huge supporter of independent comic book creators and is giving him space in the store to be able to show his artwork off. So just going to get a chance to know him and about the artwork that he's doing. So Armando, just kind of a brief elevator pitch, as far as like who you are and kind of the artwork that you do and what you're doing in the industry.
Okay. Armando Ramos, just getting my break into the industry. I've gotten lucky and gotten a couple good jobs. Mostly my artwork is extremely passionate. It's like a outlet of sorts for just getting out a whole bunch of unwanted passions that I have that I haven't been able to release since childhood. I just put out my heart onto the pages, and I get everything I can. It's just an obsessive love.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Art is, that's one of the great things about art is it can be very cathartic and allow you to get through any things that you're going through in your life. I've said it a million times that, more art we have in the world, I think it's a better place. It allows people to channel their energies into way more constructive things. So I'm super happy to hear about it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Coming out with a book here probably in about 30 years. It's just from all the research that has to be done with it. Takes place in the Bronze Age. Think like, so I would have said Game of Thrones, but I like to say more Mad Max on steroids. Story I've been researching, I don't actually want to cover it too much. I found that unfortunately, I'm sure you guys have seen this before too, and any comic book creators that are listening, when you when world like cultural events are happening, like a story will pop into your head, and then you'll find if you're not quick and you jump on it, like 10 years down the road, someone will have already taken it and they'll like have put it out into the world. I've done that several times now where I'll come up with a comic book idea, but because I just didn't jump on it, I thought I'd get to it at a later age. Someone else comes out with it like 10 to 15 years later, and it's like, I thought about that so long ago, but I didn't do anything about it. So this is a story where everybody in the pop culture phenomenon nowadays that I talk to, they seem to have like a Suicide Squad story. I'm not sure if it's because of the Suicide Squad movie that came out. What was that, 2017? Something like that?
Yeah.
But everybody that I talked to, it's like, yeah, I pretty much got Suicide Squad. And it's like, oh, so you're saying Suicide Squad? No, it's this, but it's the Suicide Squad plot. So it is Suicide Squad plot, but I'm changing it. I don't want it to be what everybody else is doing, so that it's just another story that kind of fits the cultural phenom of the times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, artwork, I think all of us are influenced by the artwork that we look at. And so, that's the great thing about it is it goes through your filter and who you are as a human being and comes out in a completely unique, interesting way. So,
Yes.
I'm excited to see it. I know you said 30 years. Hopefully it's not that long.
Forgive me if I'm butchering his name. The original Weapon X comic book. The Windsor...
Windsor Smith.
Barry Windsor Smith. So he didn't want to have anybody else affect him. So he, thinking about another guy. Losing my train of thought. What were we talking about exactly?
Like you said,
How the artwork, what you see, goes through your filter and comes out.
Yes. Barry Windsor Smith. He did a comic book recently. I think it was called Monster. I haven't had the pleasure of reading it yet, but he took close to 30 years doing it as well, just taking his time. I've heard so many artists, and it's not a bad way of being, but it's just another way of thinking. That is not my personal perspective. That perspective would be something along the lines of, no, don't think about it, because then you're just going to be on a story for 30 years, and we're never going to hear about you again. And that's understandable. Some people just want their stories out every single year, or maybe a little bit slower, but nonetheless faster than 30 years. I would rather spend Barry Windsor Smith 30 years on one story and make it as good as possible. And if that's the only story I ever come out with, then that's it. Yeah.
Gotcha.
it's like your legacy.
Yeah,
Yes,
that'd be a
your
legacy
story.
I hope I come up with more than that, but if that's it, that's it.
So are you? I mean, you're amazing artists. Just looking at their talent and some of the items that we have with us today is just beautiful and amazing. So did you like just kind of growing up? Did you have influences on artwork? Did you maybe start with stories and then start to put art to those stories? Like, how did that start for you? This passion.
I actually made the mistake of, which I think a lot of artists do, I don't know what percentage-wise that would be. A lot of us, when we're at a young age, because we're maybe not exposed to enough art, we think we're like a lot better than we are, and we close our eyes off to the rest of the world. So for a very long time, it just looked probably just like, it looked very backwards art-wise. And then I got to open my eyes maybe like around high school, and then after I went off to a job that took me a little bit of ways across the world, I got to open my eyes to other people and their perspectives, and my art got so much better. If you were to look at my art from those days, I'm glad it didn't survive, and I would hide it if I found any of it, or burn it. I'll take it back, I burn it. It just looks like someone without an open mind. You can sometimes tell if someone has an open mind or not. I'm actually working on getting out there again. I've been kind of doing this monk thing for the past 5 years, where I left art behind for like 4 years and I got terrible at it. So I did this monk thing where I just go home after my job and I just draw until it was time to go to bed. Rinse and repeat for close to 5 years. So
Wow.
I built up the skills, and then I want to get out and about now and experience other people's art, because this is still to a degree closed off mind. It's just like one track mind type thing. I don't know if that answered your question though.
Yeah. I think well, you're talking about your story, and again, we can see your artwork, how accomplished you are. This story in this book that you're trying to that you want to put out there, is that something where you're doing the story? Are you doing everything yourself, or are you partnering with anyone on this project?
This one is so being a hypocrite to everything I just said. This one is I'm going to try and keep everything that I experience when I'm getting out more, instead of being monk and going at this. I'm going to try and keep that mindset that I had for those 5 years for this particular story, just because I have a certain vision for it. And unfortunately, if it takes you 30 years, it's going to start changing slowly over time. Have you guys ever seen Taxi Driver, or Taxi with Robert De Niro?
Yep.
The guy who made it, the director, I think he was also the writer, don't quote me on that. When he made that, he said he was in a very bad spot in his mind mentally, and he wanted to do actually a lot of the things that Robert De Niro does. He fantasized about it, and I guess that was how he spilled it out of him. He said, like, it was like 40 years later, if I was to see that guy, me, on the street of New York City, that guy I used to be, I wouldn't recognize him. I wouldn't talk to him. I wouldn't know him. I'd just walk right past him. So this little time capsule of this comic book that will take maybe 30 years, I have to keep that like late 20s, early 30s type thinking. So it's going to be kind of backwards and detrimental as a growth to a human being. But I definitely want that feeling to be in the comic book.
Nice. All right.
That's awesome. Yeah, dude. Like you mentioned that Barry Windsor Smith was an artist that you looked at as doing his own project like that. Who were some of your major inspirations getting into comics growing up that you feel has brought you to where you are today?
I think anybody from my generation would be Jim Lee. The guy was the 90s. His art was the 90s. Pretty much everybody else was, even to a slight degree, mimicry of Jim Lee. Todd McFarlane, though I didn't know his name at the time, he had a huge impact on me. Later on, when I learned who he was, I was like, oh yeah, he's the guy whose artwork I've been like staring at, like with my jaw on the floor for so many years as a kid. Let's see who else. There's a couple others.
Those are some big names.
Yes.
Yeah.
They maybe have influenced a few people along the way.
Rob Liefeld.
Okay.
Also didn't know who he was for the longest time, but his artwork is amazing. I love the way he just like constantly introduces characters. That's probably made it a bit into my stories. He's just always constantly introducing new things, just new ways of being, new angles into the comics, and it's interesting. If you can keep a story interesting and new, I think it helps with the story. I mean, clearly he had something going on that he was so huge in the 90s. And while I haven't tuned into any of his comics recently, which I need to do, I'm sure he's still got it where he's probably introducing fresh material with every single one of his comics.
Well, I think each of those individuals always brings something new to the table. I mean, obviously they were part of that original Image spin-off, right? And you talk those big names, but again, they all started somewhere too, right? I mean, they don't become a big name overnight. So looking at a lot of those types of folks that, even though they were all very extremely talented, you know, they did, to your point, you know, maybe it was character interactions, maybe it was storytelling, maybe it was just different ways that they drew action on paper and things like that. So they each bring, you know, some certain skills to it. So for you, like with your passions, you talked about passions plural, thinking that there might be some, like, do you get very passionate, like for perhaps with, like, you talked about Bronze Age stuff or monsters, or is it superheroes? Like, is there certain things that just really you love to draw?
Yes, medieval, pretty much anything ancient world, and then noir. Got introduced to noir at a very young age, so it's a love, it's a passion. Haven't really gotten a chance to do anything in that area too much lately, but I do intend to do something very noir eventually. Frank Miller's Sin City, by the way, that was something that I forgot from your last question. That was obviously a huge influence. I got into that, and then like 3 years down the road, the Sin City movie came out, so it was it made even more of an impact on a young kid at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. That movie would definitely make an impact on a young kid. There's definitely some rougher material in that film.
If I might ask you guys, actually,
Yeah.
so I wasn't there when I was born the exact same year that it was released, but The Dark Knight Returns. Reading it in retrospective seems like a great comic book, but I wasn't there for the apparent like cultural phenomenon that it was. Maybe you guys could tell me about that, like how exactly what it did to influence the comic book world at the time.
I was like, Ken, do you want to kind of take
Yeah,
an angle on that?
It's funny that you say that because I remember that book hitting stands. Number one, I've never like Batman book were always easy to get. That was the first hard to find Batman book that I ever experienced. Like the Dark Knight Returns, that lightning bolt. I hate being like so visual, but it's like it's burned in your head. Everybody's ever seen that cover.
Yep.
When you see that, it was like, what is this? You got to pick it up. So the first issue I had to pick up was number 2.
Number 2?
Which was, he was all filled out on the cover. It's like, it's been obviously homage like multiple times over the years.
Yeah.
But that book that's the first time I ever saw a comic go to reprints.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was something that was never done before. And as I said too, it obviously happened a little bit later with The Killing Joke, another major Batman story. But The Dark Knight Returns changed Batman from being the 1966 Batman type of storytell into being like, this is dark stuff. And that's why it was called The Dark Knight Returns, because Frank Miller was trying to allude back to the Detective 27 Batman of the fact of like Gotham City is a grimy place and it's not fun. And all these years, Batman has never been able to clean up Gotham City. But it was probably the biggest, I would say, the gateway from comics being from kids, for comics being for all ages again. And not all ages as kids, but all ages as adults.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then it slowly was followed up by Watchmen. If I remember, Watchmen came out that same year or the next year.
Yeah, it was pretty close. Within a year or two.
86 was Dark Knight. I think 87 was Watchmen,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly.
that,
And then Alan Moore was starting to do Swamp Thing already around that time frame too. So Swamp Thing was still a code-approved book. The comics code approved, and I believe The Dark Knight Returns was not comic code approved.
That is accurate, yeah.
And that is another era transition for all the comics that you read today. Image, I would think, have to thank Frank Miller for opening that gateway, for them getting superheroes that are mainstream a chance to tell stories that are not just kid friendly.
Yeah, it
that was
the transition
very-
to more adult material. And I think
Yes.
that also opened the eyes to a lot of other authors who may have looked at comic books as, oh, this is kind of throwaway kids type material. It was The Dark Knight that really kicked off that where, oh, this could be, you could do something much more interesting with this art medium and tell more serious adult stories.
And that even goes, Frank Miller took it a little bit further back too. He started this stuff with his Daredevil storytelling. Because I still, to this day, don't know how Daredevil number 160, I think it is, the cover, it's got the comic code approval sticker on it, but it's Bullseye strangling Black Widow with a hairdryer cord. And I'm going, how is this comic code approved? But that kind of started that whole era of like, yeah, dude, like Kingpin is a dark character.
Well,
You
you
know
also,
what I mean?
well, you also
Right.
had Bullseye on the cover with Elektra's Sai
Yes,
lifting
that's
her up.
right.
With,
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
that
there's
was before
blood
Dark
and
Knight Returns, too.
yeah. So
And so Frank Miller was kind of like, I
he
guess,
was
a pioneer.
He was a huge pioneer.
in
I'm-
making sure like
absolutely.
that, hey, comics are not just a medium for kids, and it was almost like growing up
Yeah.
the industry majorly on that. But yeah, Dark Knight Returns was a very, very big impact, and DC
Yeah.
taking that risk because,
Yeah.
like with the Watchmen that year later, that was supposed to be a DC mainstream comic.
Yeah, which
But-
I really feel like that, talking about that, it really
Yes.
ties into, if you look at the DC's universe, their film universe,
Yep.
you look at it, and generally speaking, the earlier stuff, not the Flash and Shazam, but when they were doing Superman and Batman and even the Wonder Woman, they were darker in tone compared to the Marvel films, which were lighter, brighter. There was some comedy in those, and just that distinction between the two companies, essentially.
Yeah, you can pull that all back to that Frank Miller Dark Knight
Exactly.
Returns.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I think that rolled over. You started it where I was thinking, and you think about the early Batman movies again, the Batman '66 and the early Batmans, even versus how they started to get darker and darker.
Yeah.
As far as I think after that Frank Miller impact to
Yes.
that whole community of opening that up a little bit, and then even movies then started to get a little bit more. Not necessarily graphic in nature, but they talked about some of the darker stories and or just overall. It wasn't Batman necessarily. You won't see Batman kill anybody, but you see. I think Batman started to walk that line almost a little bit, like
Yes.
in the movies as well as the comics. So kind of impacted the whole genre there. So.
So, to bounce back on that, what comic really kind of opened your eyes to like, wow, this is not the comic book? How would you say, like, it impacted you more than just your basic Batman or Spider-Man or X-Men or Avengers type of story?
Probably Batman the animated series. Just every single, you could tell that there was a lot of love in every single one of those episodes, from the card stills that they have at the very beginning of the episodes, where it's like this 1940s like type card for the title card. And how every single story, so maybe when you're a kid, you don't appreciate it exactly. It's just Batman beating up a bunch of guys. But if you go back to that story, you realize how, a lot of them were well crafted. A lot of the stories were extremely well crafted. That they had a huge impact on me, like Robin's death in that series. To this day, if you, I've gone back and I've watched that episode, but if I hadn't gone back and watched that episode, if you'd have told me that they only show the rope swinging when his parents die, I would tell you were lying, because I remember in my head visually seeing them plummet to their deaths. It was a pretty dark thing for kids, but I think it's just hugely impactful. It was showing me real life stuff that I still hadn't experienced in life. I think that was a huge eye opener for me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm noticing. So you definitely kind of skew towards looks like some darker material in your artwork. Is that let me get a shot of that? Is that kind of where you're thinking that your book is eventually going to go?
Yes, had the story that I was researching had a lot of darkness. Unfortunately, that was an extremely brutal time in human history. There was still flayings were common, death by stoning. Unfortunately, that's still real in certain parts of the world. But at that time in ancient Greece, which the story partakes in, that was still a common thing. It was a very archaic, just very brutal way of life. Yeah.
So, one thing I wanted to ask you about is I'm looking at your artwork here, and it's more traditional, ink on paper. Do you also do digital? Have you transitioned into digital, or do you primarily like to stay as a traditional media with ink and paper?
Coloring wise, I have transitioned to digital only because out of necessity. I haven't been able to go to my local shop lately and maybe get acrylics or something like that. Plus, I actually don't have a lot of experience traditionally coloring. I've always been more of a black and white or a black and gray, whatever you want to call it. So probably with inking, I never want to transition if I can. I intend to never, if possible, transition with inking. It's do you guys ink at all?
No.
No, but
If you ever get a chance, and then to do it frequently, it's I don't know how to explain that. It's yeah, it's just like it's one of those passions. Like the brush, if you ink with the brush, traditionally, like maybe say Will Eisner, I love that guy's artwork. Yeah. It's like the pen is telling you what to do. Like Michelangelo, he would say, if that's a true quote, that the rock would tell him what he was sculpting out of the rock.
Yeah.
The brush tells you what to do, really. I just let it do what it is. I think to be a better brush artist, you honestly just get more and more used to the brush telling you what to do. Yeah,
That's interesting.
cool.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, I personally, I just wanted to commend you on your what you had said before about that, taking that 5 years of being that committed to your art, and coming back every day from work and working till go to sleep. I mean, that is I mean, that a lot of times that's what it takes to be great, and your artwork is fantastic.
It is
So
beautiful.
you should be 100% proud of everything that you've done. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you. Something though, to contribute on that fact, I think it's kind of funny. I'm wondering how much it will help now due to AI. Like you can pretty much probably set up any kind of composition you want with the help of AI, and then just pretty much trace on your work onto it. So it looks like those 5 years might have been for naught.
No.
I don't think so.
The computer can only reference other people's artwork, and whatever comes out of your mind is going to be unique to you. So I think AI is just a tool to help people maybe get started who are just beginning, but nothing's going to stop a real artist who's put the work in. You did just fine with the 5 years.
Yes.
Trust me. Well, one thing I wanted to ask about just Ken in particular, giving you time here at the store, and how is what's your relationship, and how did you come into this place and get space downstairs?
Oh, I've gotten lucky actually. I am hoping to know Ken better, but I literally came in the second time into the store, and I asked him if I could come in and present my artwork at a later date. It was like November, I think, when I came in.
I think so.
And he gave me the honor of being on you guys' first podcast. That blew me away. I mean, how many people do you normally meet that are willing to do that? I actually don't meet that many people that are willing to open up the doors to you like that. So that's all I can say on my relationship with Ken is I hope to further it. Because it's been very giving to me already.
Yeah, it's easy, Armando. I mean, it's said too, your talent is very next level. You can see the heart, the passion, the effort you put into it. And I said too, I got to be honest, I was a little bit hard on Armando the first time I met him because we try to maintain a family environment. I want comics to be approachable for everybody.
Yeah.
And I said too, is like that, are you okay with people asking you questions or saying to you about the fact of like, this may not be for me? And it's as long as that you're good at like saying, an answer back to the people, it's like that. If they may not like the content, but the art does not lie. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The art is good. Nobody can ever tell you this is not good art, but it may not always be for them. And you were very receptive, which was awesome, and understanding, because sometimes I've dealt with people and they're saying, well, if they don't like my art, well, they get mad. And that is something too, is going like that. We can't have that in here. And you were like very, do you know what I mean? Open to the fact. It's like that. It's like, hey, dude, like if you don't want me to put this out, like you're respectful. And I think that is something that is great at building relationships, whether it's me or any other person you're getting your art out in front of. It's a relationship that goes two ways. And I think it's awesome that you have that ability to communicate with people and understand their needs as much as your needs, because that's a very special gift that not many people or not everybody has. A lot of people do, don't get me wrong, but there is some people that need to be open-minded to the fact of like they put so much heart and so much passion into it, but you grow by being able to take advice in a way too as well. Not advice, but like constructive criticism.
Sure.
And
Well, and at the same time, this is your store, and you want to present a certain thing. I mean, the thing that's great about your store is, and you and I have talked about this before, is that we need to keep bringing young people into comic books, and that's one thing that's really special about your store. I've been into dozens and dozens of comic shops across the country, and most of them are guys in their late 20s to early 50s, and they're just collecting comics that they have for years.
Yes.
Your shop is very unique in that you have a lot of young people, and I see a lot of parents bring their kids into your store, and so you have an aesthetic that you want to help maintain. So the fact that Armando was understanding of that and being respectful of that to what you want to present,
it's super easy to work with.
Huge. Yeah,
It's awesome.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I think that's important. I think there's definitely something to be said for, as an artist, you want to be true to who you are, but maybe present, some of your material that might not be as graphic, in this environment for
Yes.
sure. And I think there's something to be said for having that, like you said, communication, being able to talk to each other on a professional level and
Yes.
understand what each person needs.
And like I said too, like with artists' opinion wise, and like that, not every story is for every person.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
absolutely.
And I said too, is like that's the thing too, is like when you can more or less absorb to the fact of like that, hey, I appreciate you looking at it, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you for taking the time out of your day. There's never a confrontation with fans and creators, because I've seen gone to Comic Cons before, and like that. The one thing that I learned and I'm apprehensive about now too is like saying anything like, I don't like comparing people's art to other artists anymore.
Sure.
Because there was an experience I had at San Diego Comic Con, like where I really liked this guy's art. It looked a lot to me like Duncan Rouleau's. And you could tell, like, oh, are you a Duncan Rouleau fan? And he goes, who's Duncan Rouleau? I'm kind of going, okay. Do you know what I mean? It's like, that's great. I appreciate that. And I said, it's like that. Wow, it's like that. Well, who are some of your inspirations?
Yeah.
And he goes, I look a little bit Humberto Ramos. I can see that in there too as well. Yeah. And he was drawing a sketch for me real quick. And he goes, okay, it's like that. It's like, if you want Duncan Rouleau or Humberto Ramos's, I'm sure they're at the show. Have a nice day. And I'm kind of going, oh, wow, I hit a nerve.
Wow.
And so like, that's the thing too, is like that. That's why I try to share that type of information with artists, is like, it's nothing, do you know what I mean? Like, you got to kind of feel out like what your audience is. And I think you do a really good job with that too, the way you respond to emails to me. And just like, as I said too, is like communication's huge in any medium you're in.
Yeah.
And the more communication you have and the understanding you have of like, you love your art, other people are going to love your art, but not everybody's going to love your story, content, or art. And that's not a bad thing. And it's just like that, making that positive experience of like that, whether they like your art or your story at all, they like your attitude, because they're going to find someone that does like what you are doing, and they'll refer you because they have that positive experience no matter what. So that's advice I'd love to share with you or with any other artist out there watching the show, is like that.
I think that's good advice.
You have talent. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
But not everybody's talent for every person. Like, for instance, I guess the best way of putting it is like, some people swear by, I'm trying to think of an artist that is John Romita Jr. Very polarizing artist, but he's one of the best in the industry. And not everybody likes John Romita Jr. because sometimes they think like his artwork doesn't look like he's doing it 110%, which is sad, but it's just because it's not their taste. So, I mean, I have customers that come in here and they just like say, oh man, I can't stand John Romita Jr.'s art. And I go, do you like Kick-Ass? And they go, yeah, Kick-Ass is one of the best comics of all time. And I go, you know it's John Romita Jr.'s art, right? And they go, yeah, it is, isn't it? So I guess I don't hate John Romita Jr. as much as I, you know what I mean? And I said too, so I think that kind of goes with story content. They've seen Todd McFarlane draw Spider-Man, and that's next level. And they see John Romita Jr. drawing Spider-Man, and that's not their cup of tea anymore. But it doesn't make John Romita Jr. a bad artist. It just makes the opinion of that fan not always on the same page with what that artist is doing.
Interesting.
Armando, with the artwork that you've that we're sharing today, and talking about your book, your project that you have, kind of longer term, I guess, where do you see yourself going from like sitting here today to that book project? Do you see yourself doing like digital art, like Kickstarter art, going to conventions, coming into the comic book stores? Like, how do you feel like, where are those steps for you that you like, I'm happy, I'm proud where I'm at? Like, what does that look like for you?
If I'm understanding your question correctly, I don't know yet, and I'm honestly, I love it. I love that I don't know. I think this life is just you going out and you figure out, because obviously there's nobody when you're born telling you this is what you have to do to get to 80 years old.
Sure.
So I honestly have no idea. For right now, it's me. I think I'm going to go to conventions, try and get my work out there.
Yeah.
And then whatever venues are presented to me after that happens, I guess that's where I'm going. And then honestly, keeping mostly this main theme for my work, but also actually changing. I think Ken brought up a good thing. I don't think it touches up specifically on your question, but I think it does touch up on, I think, what this industry needs at the time. I saw when I was younger, there was unintentional. Some people would call it gatekeeping. What I mean by that is, at my comic book store, they weren't intentionally keeping anybody out, but it was just they were so focused on their own thing, what they liked, which was like still like circa 1980s, early 1990s, that I, as a very little boy, kind of felt it was hard to get in there. You know, I kind of felt like I had to push my way in there.
Right.
If we focus more on the youth and what they want at the moment, that'll make them feel when they come in more like they're more welcome. Some people might be sending unintentional "you're not welcome" vibes when they don't pay attention to what the youth of nowadays wants in comic books.
Yeah. So that's, I think, why we truly love indie books, because you're not under like a Marvel or a DC, like their guidelines or what they feel sells books. You're able to hopefully tell the stories that you want to tell, and your projects can truly be your own, and you can own them as much as you want. And that's why we love supporting artists like yourself. So I love that fact. I love, again, I hope you can find some success at conventions and things, kind of like what we just talked about. You know, Artist Alley, you know, is full of a lot of talented individuals like yourself. So I hope, you know, by you putting yourself out there, coming into Ken's into his shop, you know, coming on the broadcast with us and talking about, you know, your passions, and just that's why we're here. We want to help in any way, shape, or form talented folks like yourself in getting your voice out there and getting your product out there. So we love it. We're very thankful that you're here with us today.
Yes.
I think with you guys' podcast, and then so I only know you guys obviously from right now from your podcast from that, but just from that alone, I can tell that you guys are definitely already making that impact in the community, the comic book community. Yeah.
If somebody wants to seek out more about you and your artwork, do you have a website, or where do you share your work at?
Yeah.
Right now, just Instagram. I do have a Behance, but I couldn't tell you that one off the top of my head. It's like a complicated one, but Instagram is Complex Algorithms. You can contact me there for business inquiries, or if you just want to see if you can get an original piece off of me.
Oh, great.
Excellent,
Cool.
excellent.
Fantastic.
Well, listen, I just really appreciate you coming on and talking with us, sharing your artwork. And like I said, I'm super impressed that you put all that work into it, 5 years of dedication. And I'm excited to see when your book comes out. I hope it's sooner than later. And so thanks again for tuning in. This is a really special episode for us to be able to come into the shop and talk with Armando. So please hit that like, subscribe, and notification bell, and we'll see you on the next one.